Hello, looking at a flight controller today. It's a Racerstar and Airbots F7. They call it the F722, and it comes in this quite dull packaging. And just show you what you actually get with it. Really not much. Get this sheet of instructions. Get these little soft mounts. And in an anti-static bag you get the actual F7 board itself. The F7 board itself is not that interesting. It's like an F7 flight controller. That's quite good. The interesting thing about this one is what it's got on the back here. If you can just see these two little things here, this is like a single or a dual BEC. This is the dual version, and what you get in it on the single version, and of course in the double version as well, you get one of them, you get a 5-volt BEC which runs up to 3 amps, and in the dual version you also get a 9-volt BEC that runs up to 3 amps. It does say that the firmware is provisional for the 9-volt BEC at the moment, and there's a whole bunch of like resource commands to use. And I guess the idea behind this one is that if you've got this really good onboard regulation for your power, and I guess the point is you should be able to get a really clean power coming through this. So your 9-volt perhaps running something like your VTX, your 5-volt running your camera, the amount of noise you should have in there should be pretty much none. At least that's what I'm suggesting might be happening. I can't think of another reason you'd want such interesting things on the back like that. So I thought I'd install it on a quad. I've got this one. Look, it's all falling apart. This had a little F3 omnibus board, and the USB connector fell off when I was plugging it in previously, and I've been meaning to go around and repair it, and I thought, you know what, why don't I just pop this on and we'll see how good it is. We'll drive the VTX from the 9-volt, we'll drive the camera from the 5-volt, and we'll see what the resulting picture looks like. At the moment there's neither a VTX or camera on here, so I shall provide a VTX and a camera to put that on, and we'll see how it goes, which I think might be quite a good test. So I'll get soldering and then we'll have a look at it.
Just while I had it out soldering, I thought it might be useful to snap this picture, because although it's got one of the normal connectors you'd use with an all-in-one ESC board, this old quad has got individual ESCs, and on the underside of the board there's 8 pads, amongst which we've got 4 of the pads there for the ESC control signals and another 2 for the VBAT and ground, which supplies power to the entire board.
Okay, so that went together pretty well. We've got here the camera section, the VTX section, so that's on the 9-volt, that's on the 5-volt. RX is over here, also 5-volt, and we've got all those 3 in case we need something else. And obviously we've got a physical buzzer here.
So here we have the finished product, and yeah, I was using the original bits, and those standoffs are massive. You see we've got a large amount of space between the flight controller and the VTX. The VTX is the original Rush FPV. It's a non-smart audio board. But yeah, that's hooked up to the 9-volt BEC. The camera is a Calyx Ratel hooked up to the 5-volt. And just before we go on, I'll just show you the Betaflight thing, because there's something quite interesting in that with the user 1 controls and how they work.
Okay, so here we are in Betaflight, and I'm not going to go through it in detail. I just wanted to show a couple of interesting things. And that is, we're on an F7 board and they've got loads of UARTs, which is really nice. UART 3 is the serial port for connecting S-Bus, and in my configuration I didn't do anything. I left it as default. You can see it's running the Air F7 firmware, and it came with 404. I've left it with the default 8 kHz gyro and 2 kHz PID, and you can see that CPU load is tiny, so you can definitely whack that up. The bit of interest here is in the modes. When I got it, it came with this user 1 mode, and I hadn't really paid much attention to what it was, and so I removed that. And there's actually even a section in the Banggood page about how to set this up, which is worth looking at, because basically this user mode turns the 9-volt BEC on and off. So if you're inside the range, you're on, and if you're outside, it's off. So what I did, I basically set this up on a 3-position switch, where my first 2 positions are on, just so I couldn't knock it accidentally, and that last position over here is off. If you're wondering why I've got so few modes here, it's the receiver I already had in it, which I couldn't be bothered to dig out again, was flashed with firmware for 8 channels plus RSSI, so, you know, weird. Anyway, back to the close-up.
So yeah, we used the user 1 to turn off that BEC if we want to, so you can actually physically power off that VTX. I'll just show you how this works. Yes, I am plugging in my quad and it's got the props on, but I've also got it configured on the radio and it's all been tested out. If I connect this up, you can see we've got the green LED there. So all I have to do is flick this switch and it completely powers off. So that is dead as a doornail. Which is interesting because I guess there's other things you could power instead of a VTX, but a VTX seems to be a decent way of being able to physically power it off. So there's absolutely no way it could burn out. But anyway, that's the setup. Let's take it out for a quick flight and see how it does.
And off we go on our test flight. I should mention this was a few weeks ago, before we had nothing but storms and rain and wind and nothing else in the UK. And it's always interesting to sort of do a flight review of a flight controller because, of course, the flight controller is a very important part of the quad, but it's not everything. So it's like, well, it's the frame, it's the ESCs, it's every part, and so it's very hard to sort of pick apart what's what. I should say that the battery is getting absolutely hammered. I was using these old 1300 ones because on this old quad it's still got sort of a Velcro thing underneath, which I used to use on my older batteries, but this is also running 2600 kV motors with 5140 props, and it's really hammering those poor old batteries. It's running at 25 milliwatts, so one thing I was looking for is there noise? Am I getting interference from what is essentially quite sort of power hungry ESCs? Are they doing anything? And the answer is they don't seem to be, aside from murdering my battery. So the picture is reasonably good. It's not without any noise at all. You can just see little bits of wibbles and wobbles on the screen there. But certainly as far as I remember it from the goggles, it's very good. Again, you have to look at some parts of this being the camera. I really do like the Calyx Ratel. It's a very nice camera. But yeah, we seem to have a very clean signal there. The quad hasn't been tuned at all. It's just going out on the absolute defaults that came with it, and it seems to be pretty good. It could do with a little bit. You can see we got little bits and wobbles just slightly, but it certainly passes muster in terms of what is acceptable for a flight controller to do, basically, when it's not tuned at all. I think this is a fairly good result for something that's not been tuned at all and stuff like that. And you know, as far as picture quality, we're getting 25 milliwatts, so we're getting a little bit of static there when we're going low below that bush. But yeah, everything is working very nicely. Obviously, you know, I'd want to go back and refine this, have proper tuning, set it up for the actual quad itself, so everything works just as is, and take a bigger battery with me next time. But yeah, pretty happy. No problems. Everything seems to be working quite well. So let's bring it down and sum up.
So there you go, that was the flight. And one interesting thing that I'd since noticed since flying that is this has actually got, the flight control's actually got a barometer built in. It didn't mention that anywhere in the description for it, and I just checked it out by putting it on my OSD and basically carrying it up and downstairs, and I could see that we have a proper altitude reading coming out. They might want to mention that because it could be a selling point for some people. So yeah, it's got a barometer as well. So yeah, I find flight controllers quite difficult to review because essentially most things will fly quite nicely, so it comes down to the sort of fact about how easy things are and what have you got on there and what have you not got on there. Well, first off, if you're going to get a flight controller these days, you may as well get an F7 because that's the way things are going. F7s also tend to have a lot more UART, and I think on the F7 you can change it between inverted and non-inverted in software, which is something you can't do with an F4. Another few interesting features of this board, if you look on the underside, aside from the BECs under there is a space to put in a Bluetooth module which will hook up to UART 6. There's also a space to directly solder in a FreeSky R XSR or a Crossfire Micro if you want to keep it sort of nice and compact and in there. As far as actually soldering this thing, this is one of the sort of differentiating factors. When I'm soldering stuff, one of the things I seem to face occasionally is you get these pads and they seem fine and you just cannot get the solder to stick to them for whatever reason. and it's just hard work. This was really nice. Most of the pads on the outside, and it makes life really easy to get in and do it. There was just a few where I had to jump onto the inside, which I didn't like as much, but at least the pads were reasonable. That was the receiver on one side and the buzzer, which is kind of in the middle, but everything else is on the outside. And you see I had that stack of things on the back that I still had some more room to add a few extra bits if I wanted to. I guess the only thing I'm not sure I'm sold on is this BEC you can turn off, because we've got loads of things that sort of, you know, go into pit mode and stuff like that. I mean, I can't argue that it's not a bad idea as well. I'm just wondering if there's any other applications you might want to turn things on and off with, but who knows. The nice thing is to have actual separate BECs that put out their own 2 different voltages, and that seems pretty sound. Yeah, so overall quite a nice flight control. I liked it. So this has been the review of the, inside here, the Racerstar and Airbot Air F7. It's called the F722 Real Pit Flight Controller. It was kindly supplied for me by Banggood, so there'll be links down below from where you can check that out on that site. Hope this review has been helpful, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.